The sun was already dipping behind the row of old warehouses when Darius Coleman finally stepped out of the garage. His uniform was stained with oil, his hands rough from a long day of fixing cars no one else in the shop wanted to touch. But his eyes, tired as they were, still held that steady, quiet patience he'd carried his whole life. The kind of patience that comes from growing up knowing you have to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. He locked the tool cabinet, slung his father's old wrench bag over his shoulder, and headed toward the parking lot. Another day done. Another shift survived. Another set of insults from Trent, the assistant manager, swallowed and buried because Darius needed the paycheck to keep his younger sister in college. But before he could reach the gate, he saw her. An elderly woman, frail, confused, clutching her purse with trembling fingers, stood beside a faded blue sedan that was coughing smoke into the air. People walked past her without looking twice. Employees pretended not to notice. A couple of teenagers pointed at the car and laughed. Darius paused. He knew the rules: no after-hours help, no free work, no involvement with customers once the shop closed. Trent had made that very clear, but something about the old woman's face stopped him. There was fear in her eyes, a soft, lost kind of fear, like she wasn't just stranded. She was alone. He stepped toward her. "Ma'am, you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up at him as if his voice pulled her back into the world. I don't know what's wrong. The car just stopped working." Darius knelt beside the smoking hood, already loosening the latch. "Let me take a quick look. You don't need to worry." But the moment he touched the car, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Darius, what do you think you're doing?" Trent marched across the lot, face twisted with irritation. He didn't even acknowledge the old woman, just pointed at Darius like he was catching him committing a crime. "That's company time, that's company liability, and you're done." The old woman flinched. Darius stood silently, stunned. Trent fired him right there in the lot. No discussion, no explanation, no humanity. The old woman tried to protest, her voice trembling, but Trent dismissed her with a wave of his hand. And as Darius walked away, jobless, humiliated, the old woman watched him with a deep, quiet sorrow. A sorrow that hid a truth no one in that parking lot knew. What they didn't know would change everything. Darius Coleman didn't grow up with much, but what he did grow up with was pride. Not the loud, kind people parade around, but the kind that shows in the way a man carries himself, the way he treats others, the way he refuses to let bitterness turn him into someone he's not. His father, Marcus Coleman, taught him that. Marcus was a mechanic too, steady hands, gentle voice, and a work ethic that could shame an entire company. He used to tell Darius, "A man's worth ain't measured by who notices him, but by how he moves when nobody's watching." But the world didn't treat Marcus the way he treated it. Darius was only 10 when he watched his father get fired for something he didn't do. A missing tool, a false accusation, and a manager who needed someone to blame. Darius remembered the humiliation in his father's eyes that day. How he stood straight anyway, head high, refusing to argue because he knew the system wasn't built to listen to men like him. Marcus died a few years later, and Darius carried the memory of that injustice like a weight strapped to his chest. So when he grew up, he told himself one thing. He'd be the kind of man his father was, kind, patient, and honest, even if the world tried to punish him for it. Darius's present world. At 29, Darius worked at Walsh Automotive Services *, the largest auto shop in town. It should have been a place where a skilled mechanic could build a real career. But under Trent Mallory's watch, it felt more like a battlefield, one where Darius had to dodge ego, bias, and disrespect just to make it through the day. Darius wasn't just good at fixing cars, he had a gift. He could listen to an engine for 5 seconds and know exactly what was wrong. Customers loved him. Coworkers often asked for his help even though Trent hated that they did. But talent wasn't enough, not here. Trent made subtle comments about Darius's attitude, criticized him for things other employees did without consequence, monitored his breaks as if timing a criminal, and constantly told him he was replaceable. Darius endured it because he needed the job. Because he promised his younger sister, Keisha, that she would finish college no matter how many extra shifts he had to take. Keisha was studying nursing, the first in their family to even attend a university. Whenever Darius felt beaten down, he reminded himself of the day she got her acceptance letter and ran through the house screaming. He wasn't about to let Trent or anyone else keep her from succeeding. The woman everyone ignored. The elderly woman Darius helped in the parking lot, Evelyn, was a stranger to him that day. But even as a stranger, she stirred something in him. Maybe it was the way she clutched her purse too tightly, as if afraid someone might snatch it. Maybe it was the way her voice hitched every time she tried to explain what happened to her car. Or maybe it was the memory of watching older black women in his neighborhood carry burdens no one ever bothered to lighten. He didn't see her as an inconvenience. He saw a human being who needed help. And that was enough. But the shop wasn't built for compassion anymore, not under Trent. Inside the auto shop, a culture of fear. While the shop's owner, Richard Walsh, was known in town for being fair and generous, he wasn't around often. His mother, Evelyn, lived in a private residence far from the day-to-day business. Most employees had never even met her. In Richard's absence, Trent acted like the king of the castle. Rules changed depending on who he liked. Mistakes were forgiven for some. For others, especially Darius, simple misunderstandings became formal write-ups. The younger mechanics noticed. They whispered about how unfair Trent was, how he pushed good workers away while protecting the lazy ones who laughed at his jokes. But none of them had the courage to stand up to him. Trent had a way of making people feel small, like their jobs depended on staying silent. For Darius, silence became survival. The day before everything changed. The day Darius got fired had been rough from the start. A full schedule of repairs, a rushed lunch break, 3 different customers demanding updates at the same time, and Trent breathing down his neck like he was waiting for a mistake. Yet despite it all, Darius finished every job flawlessly. But that didn't matter. Not to Trent. Not to someone who had already decided what he thought of him. So when Darius stepped outside after clocking out and saw Evelyn struggling with her smoking car, he didn't think about rules. He didn't think about consequences. He only thought about doing what was right. He saw someone's grandmother, someone's mom, someone who shouldn't be standing alone in a lot full of people who didn't care. Helping her wasn't an act of rebellion. It was who he was. The firing deeper than anger. When Trent fired Darius, it wasn't about protocol. It wasn't about company liability or after-hours rules. It was about control, about putting Darius in his place, about making an example out of him so no one else dared to show humanity above policy. Evelyn saw that. Even in her confusion, she understood cruelty when it stood in front of her. She watched Trent's face as he spoke to Darius, sharp, dismissive, almost hungry for the power he held in that moment. And though her voice trembled, she tried to defend him. Trent shut her down. But Evelyn wasn't just an elderly stranger. She was the owner's mother. And though she said nothing more in that moment, she carried everything Trent had done inside her like a stone sinking deeper into water. That night, Darius didn't eat. Didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, wondering how he would tell Keisha he failed her. Wondering how a good deed turned into the worst moment of his year. He didn't know that miles away, Evelyn sat with her son at the dinner table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea, replaying every second of what she'd witnessed. Richard watched her closely. His mother never looked this shaken unless something terrible had happened. And when she finally whispered the words, "A good man lost his job today because he helped me," Richard felt a chill run through him. The shop was his father's legacy. His mother was his heart. And someone had made them both feel powerless in the same breath. The storm was already forming. None of them knew how deep it would run. But one thing was certain. Darius's story was no longer just his own. Richard Walsh had always known his mother to be calm. Even in her old age, even with her memory slipping in small, quiet ways, she held herself with grace. But that night, when he walked into the dining room and saw her sitting at the table with her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea, something inside him tightened. There was a heaviness in the air he couldn't ignore. She didn't look up when he entered. She didn't smile. She didn't ask about his day. She simply stared down into the cup as if the steam rising from it carried a story she wasn't ready to tell. Richard took the chair across from her and waited, giving her time. He knew his mother well enough to know she spoke only when her heart pressed her. And finally, after what felt like minutes of silence, her voice emerged, thin and trembling. "A good man lost his job today," she said. Richard sat up straighter. She never started conversations like that. She never talked about strangers with such emotion. He asked her gently, "What happened, Mom? Where were you?" Her jaw tightened. It was the first sign of anger he had seen from her in years. She explained in short, uneven breaths that her car had broken down near his auto shop. She told him she was scared, confused, unsure of what to do. She described how people walked around her, how no one stopped, how she felt invisible in a world she once understood but no longer recognized. Then she paused, closed her eyes, and inhaled slowly before continuing. "There was a young man," she said softly, "a black mechanic. He came over to me even though his shift was done. He spoke to me gently like I mattered. He made me feel safe again." She swallowed. "And he was fired for it." Richard sat back, stunned. Fired for helping her, fired while doing something decent. His mother shook her head slowly, her voice cracking as she described Trent's behavior. She didn't remember his name exactly, but she remembered his face. She remembered the way he spoke to her, sharp and dismissive, as if her age and confusion made her unworthy of respect. She remembered how he spoke to the mechanic even worse, like he was barely human. She repeated that part twice, almost as if reliving it hurt more than she expected. Richard felt something heavy settle in his chest. His father had started Walsh Automotive with a simple belief. No matter who the customer was, everyone deserved kindness, and no matter who the employee was, they deserved dignity. His father was gone now, but the values he built the shop on were supposed to live through his son. Hearing that his own employees had humiliated an elderly woman, his own mother, and punished a good man for helping her felt like betrayal. It felt like his father's legacy had been twisted while he wasn't looking. He asked her to tell him everything again, slowly. She did. Each detail sharpened the image in his mind, the smoke rising from her old car, the mechanic kneeling beside it, the disrespect from Trent, the firing, the confusion, the shame she felt for causing trouble, and the sorrow she carried for the young man she couldn't protect. When she finished, the room fell silent. Richard looked at his mother, really looked at her, and what he saw was not just hurt, it was disappointment. Not in the mechanic, not in herself, but in him. In the company he was supposed to protect, in the culture he was supposed to uphold. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "Do you remember the young man's name?" Her eyes softened. "Darius," she whispered. "He said his name was Darius." Hearing the name grounded everything. It made the story real. It gave the injustice a face. And it lit a slow-burning fury inside Richard, the kind that didn't explode outward but solidified into purpose. He stood up from the table, kissed his mother gently on the forehead, and told her he would take care of it. He didn't wait until morning. Within 20 minutes, he was in his office reviewing shift logs, security footage, and employee records. The footage didn't show much. The angle of the parking lot cameras was terrible, but it showed just enough. It showed Darius walking toward his mother. It showed Trent storming out. It showed Darius being forced to hand over his badge and toolbox. It showed his mother shrinking back during the confrontation. And it showed Trent standing with his chest puffed out like a man who believed he owned the world. Richard clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. He picked up his phone and called the shop. The night shift lead answered. Richard asked to be put on speaker. His voice was calm but cold. He asked for a detailed explanation of why a mechanic was fired that day. The employees hesitated. Then Trent's voice cut through, confident and dismissive, as he spun a story filled with lies. He claimed Darius had disrespected him, refused orders, endangered an elderly woman, and caused a scene. The more he lied, the more Richard felt a fire growing inside him. But he didn't interrupt, not yet. He let Trent finish. When the call ended, Richard didn't yell or rage. He simply wrote down what he needed to know. He had heard enough to confirm that the sickness in his shop started with Trent, and he needed to see it for himself. The next morning, Richard drove to his mother's home. He expected her to still be shaken, maybe tired from the emotional weight of the previous day. Instead, he found her dressed, ready, and waiting by the door. She looked at him with eyes full of quiet determination. "I want to go with you," she said. He didn't argue. He knew there was something she needed to witness, something she needed to say, something she needed to set right. He helped her into the passenger seat and drove toward the shop. Inside the garage, the morning shift had just started. Workers were grabbing clipboards, unlocking tool cabinets, checking cars lined up for the day. Conversations quieted when Richard walked through the door. Nobody had expected him. Nobody expected him with his mother beside him. Richard didn't ask where Trent was. He didn't need to. Trent practically sprinted toward them when he spotted the owner in the lobby, a wide, fake smile plastered across his face. He greeted Richard with over-the-top enthusiasm, pretending everything was fine, pretending the shop was perfect, pretending he wasn't the reason an elderly woman went home shaken and a good man went home unemployed. But Richard watched him carefully, and for the first time, Trent seemed uneasy. Maybe it was the look in Richard's eyes. Maybe it was the presence of the quiet woman standing beside him. Or maybe it was the strange silence that settled over the shop as if every employee sensed something was about to break. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply asked one question, his tone almost casual. "Where is the mechanic you fired yesterday?" Trent hesitated, his confidence cracking for the first time. He started repeating the same lies he had told on the phone. He talked about disrespect, liability, insubordination. But before he could finish, Evelyn stepped forward. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "That's not what happened." Every mechanic within earshot froze. Heads turned. Wrenches stopped midair. It was like time paused. Evelyn's eyes locked on Trent with a clarity she hadn't held yesterday. Her voice was still soft, but it carried a strength that left no room for argument. She described the entire encounter exactly as she remembered it. She described Darius's kindness. She described Trent's disrespect. She described the humiliation he caused. And when she reached the part where Darius was fired, her voice shook, not from confusion, but from disbelief that a man could be punished for doing good. Trent's face went pale. Sweat gathered near his temples. He mumbled excuses, stumbling over his own words. He tried to change the story again, but there was no space left to twist it. Not with the owner watching. Not with the employees listening. Not with Evelyn speaking truth so vivid no one dared question it. Richard didn't look at Trent. He looked at his mother. Then he did something that stunned the entire shop. He turned to his employees and said, "We're going to find Darius." Next morning, the auto shop feels different, almost hollow. Malik's absence isn't just noticeable, it's loud. The empty bay where he used to stand feels like a missing heartbeat in the rhythm of the shop. Workers move slower, eyes heavier, spirits quieter. No one says what's on their mind, but every glance toward that empty space carries the same unspoken truth. Something good was taken away yesterday. Mr. Carter walks through the shop pretending everything is normal. He forces his usual confidence, but the atmosphere pushes back against him. He notices how voices drop when he walks by. He notices hesitation in the workers' movements. He notices guilt sneaking into his own thoughts. He keeps telling himself he made the right call. That rules matter. That discipline matters. But the more he repeats it, the less he believes it. Across town, Malik sits at home on a worn-out couch, tapping his foot without realizing it. His mother's picture rests on the table beside him. Her smile is soft, her eyes filled with warmth he misses every day. She raised him to believe that kindness was strength, not weakness. But now he wonders if the world still agrees with her. He tries to update his resume. He types 2 words, deletes them, types 3 more, deletes those 2. His mind keeps replaying the moment he was fired. The shock, the humiliation, the disbelief. He did nothing wrong, worse, he did something right and still ended up punished for it. He can't wrap his head around it. At the shop, quiet whispers begin between the workers. They talk about Malik's work ethic, his kindness, his reliability. Jimmy, the youngest mechanic, mentions how Malik once stayed 2 extra hours after his shift to help him finish a repair. Another older mechanic talks about how Malik quietly paid for a customer's part when the customer couldn't afford it. None of these stories surprise anyone. They only make what happened feel even more wrong. Teresa, the office assistant, is the one who can't shake off the image of Malik helping that old woman outside the shop. She saw the whole thing. She saw the woman nearly fall. She saw Malik catch her. She saw him sit her down gently and pick up her spilled medication. None of it looked like unprofessional behavior. It looked like humanity. And humanity shouldn't get a man fired. Later that day, Teresa walks into the corporate office to drop off paperwork. As she passes by an open door, she freezes. Sitting inside is the old woman from the shop. She's talking to her son, the owner of the company, telling him how she misplaced her pills last week and how a kind mechanic helped her, though she never got his name. The realization hits Teresa like a weight dropping straight into her chest. That's the owner's mother. The same woman Malik helped. The same woman whose kindness created the chain of events that ended in Malik losing his job. After the owner steps outside the office, Teresa approaches him carefully. She tells him she knows exactly who helped his mother. She describes the incident honestly, Malik's calm voice, his gentle hands, his patience. Richard Dawson, the owner, listens quietly. His expression becomes colder with every detail. He asks where Malik is. Teresa swallows hard before telling him. Malik was fired yesterday. The hallway falls silent. Richard doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't react dramatically. He simply nods and says, "Thank you for telling me." But the tension in his jaw reveals the storm rising inside him. Back at the shop, Mr. Carter sits in his office with a strange discomfort he can't shake off. Something gnaws at him, a mixture of guilt, second thoughts, and a quiet voice whispering that he handled everything wrong. But pride is louder. Pride keeps telling him he had to discipline Malik. Pride keeps telling him he's in the right. His phone rings. The caller ID says corporate office. When he answers, he's told that Mr. Dawson, the owner, is coming to the shop today. Not next week. Not tomorrow. Today. Mr. Carter feels his heartbeat jump. He tries to tell himself it's nothing serious. Maybe paperwork, maybe an inspection. But he knows the owner never visits without a reason. Never. Meanwhile, at the corporate office, the old woman sits in a comfortable chair trying to recall the man who helped her. She closes her eyes and remembers his voice. Steady, gentle, respectful. She remembers the way he guided her, how safe she felt, how grateful she was. She tells her son she wants to thank him properly. Then she learns he was fired. Her heart sinks. She tells her son something that pierces him deeply. Good men shouldn't lose their place in this world for choosing kindness. Those words settle in his mind like a stone sinking into deep water. At home, Malik struggles to stay hopeful. The weight of what happened feels heavier each hour. He tries to apply for jobs, but his mind keeps drifting. He wonders what he could have done differently. He wonders why doing good ended with him being punished. He wonders if the world is trying to tell him something he doesn't want to hear. Later that afternoon, he steps outside to sit on the apartment stairway, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. A neighbor asks if he's okay. Malik says he's fine, even though his eyes tell another story entirely. Back at the shop, a black luxury car pulls into the parking lot. Everyone freezes. They recognize it immediately, the owner's car. Mr. Carter rushes out of his office, straightening his shirt, trying to mask the fear crawling up his spine. The owner steps out of the car with his mother beside him. The workers whisper among themselves. Tension settles over the shop like thick fog. Mr. Carter forces a smile and greets them, but the owner's face remains stern. He looks around the shop slowly, then asks a question that slices through the silence like a blade. Where is the mechanic who helped my mother last week? No one moves. No one breathes. Mr. Carter tries to explain. He stumbles through excuses. He mentions company policy, professionalism, discipline. He uses every word except the one he should be using, fairness. The owner doesn't look convinced. He turns to his mother. She simply shakes her head. She says, "That young man treated me like a human being. You punished him for that." The workers look away, some ashamed. Some relieved the truth is finally being spoken out loud. The owner demands Malik's address. Mr. Carter hesitates, but the owner's expression erases any room for negotiation. He gives the address reluctantly. Within minutes, the owner and his mother are back in the car, heading toward Malik's apartment. The mother insists they go immediately. She fears Malik might think he did something wrong. She fears he might be discouraged. She fears she is the reason he lost his job. As they get closer to the apartment, Richard keeps remembering her words. Kindness should never cost a man his dignity. At that same moment, Malik sits on his apartment steps again, looking defeated but trying not to fall apart. He hears a car stop in front of him and assumes it's a neighbor. But then he sees a shadow move over his shoes. He looks up slowly. The old woman is standing right in front of him, leaning on her cane. Beside her stands the owner of the auto shop, a man whose expression holds anger, regret, and urgency all woven together. Malik's breath catches in his throat. He has no idea what's about to happen. But his life is about to change again, in a way he never imagined. Malik freezes when he sees the two figures standing in front of him. For a moment he thinks his eyes are tricking him, because nothing about this situation makes sense. Yesterday he was fired like he was nothing. Today, the very people linked to that moment are standing on his doorstep. The old woman offers a gentle smile, the same warm smile she gave him the first time they met. The owner's expression carries something that surprises Malik even more: regret. The old woman steps forward first, leaning on her cane but moving with a determination that doesn't match her frail body. She stops right in front of Malik and places her hand over his. Her touch is soft, but the sincerity behind it hits him with unexpected force. She tells him she remembers everything. She remembers his kindness. She remembers the care in his voice. She remembers how safe she felt in his presence. She tells him she came because she needs to say something important to him. Malik listens quietly as she says that no one should be punished for kindness. She says that in a world full of people who walk past suffering without looking twice, he chose compassion. She tells him he did nothing wrong. If anything, he reminded her that there are still good people left in this world. Her eyes shine as she speaks, and Malik feels a tightness in his chest he wasn't expecting. The owner clears his throat and steps forward. His voice is lower now, carrying a humility Malik didn't expect from a man in his position. He admits that the shop made a terrible mistake. He admits that Malik's firing was not only wrong but deeply embarrassing for him personally, because the woman Malik helped wasn't just a random customer. That woman was his mother, his family, his responsibility. Malik's eyes widen, and the shock washes over him like cold water. Suddenly everything makes sense: the old woman's presence, the owner's expression, the urgency. He never imagined the woman he helped belonged to the most powerful man in the company. The owner continues talking, slower this time, his voice filled with sincerity. He says no company policy should ever punish compassion. No rule should stand above basic humanity. He explains that he drove here not just to apologize, but to take responsibility in a way that actually matters. Malik sits in silence, taking in each word. For the first time since losing his job, he feels like he's being treated as a human being. The owner tells him that what happened at the shop has consequences, and not for Malik, for the one who made the decision. He explains that kindness is a core value of the company because his mother raised him to believe in it. Firing a man for helping her is not just wrong, it is deeply offensive. It betrays the entire spirit of the business he built. He tells Malik that he went to the shop earlier and demanded answers from the manager. The workers watched as truth unraveled and excuses began to crumble. He says that when he asked who helped his mother, the silence in that room said everything. And when he learned the real reason Malik was fired, he felt something break inside him, the trust he had placed in the man running his shop. Malik listens, still confused, still unsure what this is building toward. The old woman squeezes his hand gently and tells him that he deserves better. Not just an apology, not just a correction, something more. The owner kneels slightly to be eye level with Malik, something Malik never expected from a man with power. He tells Malik he wants him back, not as a regular mechanic, but in a higher position. He wants him to be a lead technician. He wants him to train others. He wants him to become the example of what their company stands for. He says employees like Malik define the heart of the business far more than rules on a wall. Malik feels a wave of emotion build inside him. For a moment he can't speak. He doesn't know what to say. The offer sounds unreal, almost too good to be true. But then he thinks of the humiliation he faced, the way the manager treated him, the bitterness that clung to him the entire night. The thought of returning to that environment brings back shadows he doesn't want to relive. He tells the owner he is grateful, truly grateful, but he needs to think. He doesn't want to step back into a place where he was treated like he didn't matter. The owner nods, understanding immediately. He tells Malik he won't return to that shop, not as long as the man who wronged him still works there. Then, with a firm tone, he reveals something that stuns Malik again. He has already fired the manager. Malik's breath catches. The owner explains that leadership isn't just about enforcing rules, it's about upholding values. Anyone who punishes kindness has no place leading a team meant to serve people. He says the old manager was escorted out of the building earlier that afternoon. The workers will be told tomorrow. Malik sits still, letting that news sink in. The feeling is overwhelming. A mix of justice, vindication, relief. The old woman smiles softly, watching him with eyes full of understanding. She tells him she pushed her son to act because she believes in fairness. She believes that good people should be protected, not punished. The owner then gives Malik a folded envelope. Malik hesitates, then opens it slowly. Inside is a letter, an official offer of a new position. A position not at the shop he was fired from, but at the main corporate service center, the most respected location in the company, with better pay, better hours, and a team trained under the company's core values. Malik reads the letter twice, barely believing the words. This time the owner speaks more gently. He tells Malik that he didn't just earn this opportunity, he deserves it. And it's not charity, it's recognition. But the emotional part hasn't happened yet. The old woman takes a deep breath and tells Malik something that hits deeper than any apology or promotion ever could. She tells him that the day he helped her, she was having one of the hardest days of her life. She had received confusing medical news. She felt afraid. She felt alone. She was losing her independence slowly, and it frightened her. She says instead of treating her like a burden, he treated her like a person. His kindness gave her strength at a moment she desperately needed it. Then she gently wipes a tear from her eye and says, "Son, you didn't just help me stand. You helped me feel human again." Malik feels emotion rising in his chest, tightening his throat. No one has spoken to him with such sincerity in years. He didn't know his small act had meant so much. He didn't know he had changed someone's day or life so deeply. He looks down, trying to steady himself, but the old woman places her hand under his chin and lifts his face slightly. She tells him that kindness is a rare gift and that the world needs more men like him. She says she came here not because her son is the owner, but because she believes gratitude should always be spoken out loud. The owner then steps closer and says something final, something that seals the moment completely. He tells Malik that people like him are the backbone of communities, the quiet heroes who don't get applause or rewards but keep the world humane. He says that if more people acted like Malik, the world would be a much better place. Malik exhales slowly, overwhelmed. He looks at the letter again, then at the old woman, then at the owner. The heaviness he carried since losing his job begins to fade. Not completely, pain doesn't disappear overnight, but enough for him to stand up straighter. He looks at the owner and finally speaks with clarity. He accepts the job. The old woman smiles proudly, holding his hand as he stands. The owner breathes out, relieved, and shakes Malik's hand with a firm grip filled with respect. For the first time in a long time, Malik feels seen. He feels valued. He feels like his kindness finally mattered. As they all stand together on the sidewalk, the sun breaks through the clouds, casting a soft light over them. Malik glances at the sky, feeling something he hasn't felt since his mother passed away, hope. The owner tells him they will start paperwork tomorrow morning. The old woman says she is bringing cookies. Malik laughs softly, something he hasn't done in days. And for the first time since everything began, the world feels right again. Malik walks them back to their car. Before getting in, the old woman turns back one more time, her eyes warm and sincere. She tells him that sometimes life takes things away only to return something better. Malik nods, deeply moved. As the car drives away, Malik watches until it disappears down the street. He stands there quietly, his heart steady, his spirit lighter. He doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, but he knows one thing for sure. Kindness didn't fail him. Kindness saved him. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was unsure whether it was allowed to move forward after a night like that. The entire city woke to the news of the billionaire's downfall, the corruption case, the investigation, the anonymous whistleblower, and the heroic janitor whose courage had exposed it all. But for Malik, none of that felt real yet. He had barely slept more than an hour, and even that sleep was not gentle. Every time he closed his eyes, he replayed the moment he stood in front of Gabriel, the moment he chose to protect instead of hate, the moment he refused to become the monster everyone expected him to be. He arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The lobby was calm, the corridors filled with distant footsteps and the faint rolling of medical carts. He walked slowly, exhausted, replaying the chaos of the night. When he reached Gabriel's room, a nurse was adjusting a drip bag. Gabriel was awake, tired, pale, weak, but awake. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Malik moved closer, unsure of what to say. Gabriel blinked slowly, and his voice came out faint. "You came back." Malik nodded. "I said I would." Gabriel let out a breath that trembled. "After everything I did to you, and you still tried to save me. Why?" Malik looked down for a moment. He searched for the right words, not because the truth was complicated, but because it was heavy. "Because someone had to end the cycle," Malik said softly. "Someone had to choose humanity over revenge. If I hated you, I would have become like you, and I refused to let anyone turn me into that." Gabriel turned his head to the window, his eyes watering. For the first time, he didn't speak like a businessman or a billionaire or a man used to power. He spoke like a person, a flawed, frightened, broken person. "I don't deserve this chance." "No," Malik said honestly. "You don't, but you're getting it anyway. What you do with it, that's on you now." Gabriel closed his eyes as if absorbing the weight of those words. Malik didn't stay long. He wanted Gabriel to rest, and he had his own life to return to. But as he stepped out of the room, he heard Gabriel whisper, "Thank you for not letting me die as the man I was." Malik didn't turn around. He simply walked down the hall, letting the sentence settle inside him. Later that day, Malik walked into the community shelter where he had been secretly volunteering for months. The same kids who always ran to him came rushing again. He laughed, kneeling down to greet every child as they tried to talk over each other. This place always reminded him of who he truly was. Not a janitor defined by what people thought of him, not a man controlled by someone else's cruelty, but someone who still believed in kindness, even when the world punished him for it. One of the older volunteers, Mrs. Reyna, approached him with a warm smile. "You're a hero, Malik." He shook his head immediately. "No, heroes wear capes, I was just there." "You were there," she said firmly, "and you chose right, don't dismiss that." He didn't argue. Compliments made him uncomfortable anyway. But he realized something important. He wasn't the same man who walked into that billionaire's building months ago. He had been reshaped, not by the cruelty he suffered, but by the strength he discovered in himself while enduring it. When he returned home, Malik found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly together. She stared at him with tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Malik sat beside her. "Because I didn't want you to worry." "I am your mother," she said softly. "Worrying is the one thing I will always do. But Malik, I am proud of you, more than I can ever say. You did not just save a life last night. You saved your own." He looked down, feeling emotion tighten his throat. She placed her hand over his and squeezed gently. "You stayed good," she said. "That is the hardest thing a person can do." Malik let those words settle deep inside him. The next few days moved quickly. The world had plenty to say about the scandal. Some called Malik a hero, some demanded Gabriel be punished to the fullest extent of the law, some argued that Gabriel deserved prison, not forgiveness. Malik stayed quiet. He stayed out of interviews. He stayed away from reporters waiting outside his building. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. But peace doesn't always arrive the way we expect. 3 days after the incident, Malik's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer it. "Mr. Malik," a formal voice said, "this is attorney Rachel Donovan. I represent Gabriel." Malik sighed. "If you're calling because he wants something." "No," she interrupted gently. "He wants to give something." Malik paused. "What?" "He asked me to inform you. He assigned over half of his shares from the development project you helped expose. The profits will fund the community shelters you volunteer at. Permanently." Malik's breath caught in his chest. "He did that?" "Yes, and one more thing. He insisted this be public, but without your name attached. He didn't want to drag you into anything if you didn't want it." Malik didn't know what to say. He ended the call with nothing more than a quiet thank you. He didn't trust Gabriel fully, not yet. But he believed in the possibility that even broken men could rebuild themselves if given the chance. And maybe, just maybe, Gabriel was trying. That evening, Malik returned to the skyscraper he once worked in. The building felt different now. Lighter, less poisonous. The security guard greeted him with warmth instead of suspicion. Employees passing by offered nods of respect instead of dismissive glances. A new manager had taken charge of the janitorial staff, and he welcomed Malik with genuine appreciation. "We lost a good man," he said. "If you'd like your old job back." "No," Malik said with a polite smile. "Thank you, but my path is somewhere else now." He walked out of the building without looking back, because he didn't need to. A week later, Malik stood on a small outdoor stage at the grand opening of the newly expanded community shelter, funded entirely by Gabriel's redirected assets. Kids clapped, parents cheered, volunteers smiled brightly. Malik was asked to give a short speech, even though he hated public speaking, but he stepped forward anyway. "I'm not here today because I'm special," he began. "I'm here because I learned something important. People can hurt you, humiliate you, underestimate you, and still fail to break you. Your worth isn't measured by someone else's cruelty. It's measured by what you choose to carry in your heart when the world tries to make you bitter. Everyone listened silently. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Malik continued. It's choosing not to let someone else's darkness live inside you. And kindness is a power most people don't understand until it saves them. When he finished, the applause was warm and long. Later that night, Malik walked home under a quiet sky. The streets were peaceful, the air cool, the world finally calm. He felt something inside him he hadn't felt in years, relief. Not because everything was fixed, but because he had survived it without losing himself. His phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number appeared. "I'm getting help," the message said. "Thank you for giving me a reason to try." Malik stared at the screen. Then he typed back one sentence. "Make it count." He didn't wait for a reply. Instead, he slipped his phone into his pocket and continued walking, his steps steady, his heart light, and his future finally and fully his own. Because in a world full of people willing to harm others to feel powerful, Malik proved something unforgettable. Strength isn't in domination. Strength is in compassion. Strength is in refusing to become the monster that hurt you. And that choice, more than anything else, is what makes a man truly powerful. In life, the choices we make define not just who we are, but what the world becomes around us. Malik could have been bitter. He could have let anger, humiliation, and injustice shape him into someone cold, someone who stopped caring, but he didn't. He chose kindness when it cost him. He chose compassion when it punished him. And in that choice, he discovered something far greater than a job, far greater than recognition, far greater than wealth. He discovered the strength of his own heart. True power is not in holding authority over others. True power is in remaining human when the world tries to strip you of it. Malik's story reminds us that being good in a world that rewards cruelty is not weakness. It is courage. It is strength. And it has the power to change lives, even when we can't immediately see the impact. One small act of kindness can ripple outward, touching people we may never meet, and in ways we may never fully understand. Sometimes life punishes goodness. Sometimes the world seems unfair. But every choice we make carries weight. Every moment of empathy, every act of honesty, every decision to act with dignity matters more than we know. And even when injustice temporarily overshadows our efforts, integrity has a way of returning. Justice, recognition, and redemption often arrive not because we demand them, but because we stayed true to ourselves. Malik's journey teaches us that no act of kindness is ever wasted. Even in the face of cruelty, even when punished, even when overlooked, goodness leaves a mark that cannot be erased. It can save others. It can save ourselves. And it can transform the course of a life, sometimes in ways we never expected. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remind them that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is power in compassion, courage in integrity, and hope in the small but mighty choices we make every day. Because the world needs more people like Malik, people who refuse to let injustice define them, and who choose humanity even when it costs them everything.